Ellouise, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. I'm excited to be here.
So, why don't you share a little bit with us? Kind of what is your focus and what do you do?
I help highly sensitive women to peacefully let go of excess weight without any kind of punishing diets or having to hate their body so that they can actually finally end their battle with the bathroom scales and love the woman smiling back at them in the mirror.
Hmm, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like the peacefully, and I think it's on your Instagram too. Before we started speaking, I looked at your account and
Hmm.
and you overall have this very, very nice energy. So that's why I wanted to have this soulful conversation.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I really love what you're doing now, and I was really drawn to connecting with you.
Oh, wonderful. I know we spoke a little bit. Has it been like a week or two by now? A couple of weeks ago, uh,
Hmm.
because we connected online. We connected
Uh-huh.
by Instagram initially, and I think I've been in this season of gentleness,
Hmm.
the kind of energy, I think before we started recording, we talked about like reminders, right? Sometimes when, like at a certain point in our lives or a certain month or weeks, we kind of have something on our minds, and then we
Hmm.
see that around us,
Yes.
people doing it.
Hmm.
Either it's exhibiting certain energy or using certain words or seeing it visually. But for me, because August was pretty tough, given that my
Yeah.
little sweet doggy passed away, and he's
Yeah.
such a gentle soul.
Hmm.
And I have really kind of leaned into the appreciation of gentleness because I think in our day to day, we value more this kind of like strengths, we call it confidence, kind of this
Hmm.
um, more assertive way of being and speaking. I think we
Yeah.
associate also with success, and it's modeled all around us. And I don't know, this period has really invited me to kind of deeper appreciate um, gentleness and see the power and the strength and the beauty behind it. So I'm really, I love your energy and I love also what you do and the way you do it. So, can you tell us a little more where you're at? Because you are in England, right?
Hmm. Yes, that's right. I live in a village in northeast England, and I've moved around the country a little bit actually, but I always felt called back to the northeast. It feels really like that's where I'm called to do my work from, even though I do most of it online. In fact, nearly all of it online. That just it feels like it's the right place to be energetically. And I know while that doesn't resonate with everybody, to me, the energy of things is important.
Mm. Yeah, I love that you bring it up. Do you feel like that's home for you? Like have you had that feeling that that is your home?
Yes, I do believe that it's part of my home. So it's really interesting actually that you bring that up because looking back, when I was a kid, I never really felt at home at all in the world. And I was actually quite angry at God because I felt like I just wanted to go home, but I was home. It was a very strange situation because I didn't feel like I fitted in. I didn't feel like I understood the world around me, and it was very, very difficult. And it was only as I grew up and learned more about who I was, why I was the way that I was, which is highly sensitive, like the women I serve, that I began to understand why I was having so many challenges and why it was difficult for me to feel connected to people. I experienced almost like there's a veil between me and the world of other people connecting, and why can't I make these connections and that kind of thing. And just really everything that I've been through in my life and having moved around the country, I really do feel that it doesn't actually matter where I am, because I need to be coming home to myself. And that's part of how I help the women that I serve now in what I do, which we can talk about that a little bit if you like, but that is something that's just so powerful, coming home to yourself. That being said, the energy of where I'm at and where I am physically at the moment, it feels much more aligned than where I was when I lived in the south of the country. I lived in a beautiful part of Surrey. It was like on the Surrey, Hampshire, West Sussex border. Absolutely beautiful, but it just didn't really feel like home to me.
Mm. I love everything you're bringing up. And I feel like it's a common experience for
Mhm.
people who are sensitive or empathetic, that in their childhood that it's kind of disorienting.
Yes, absolutely. It was a comfort to me to realize that it was a thing, being highly
Mhm.
sensitive was becoming recognized, and learning about it meant that I realized actually there's about 20% of the population, give or take, that are also highly sensitive. And it suddenly just was like a weight was lifted when I started to understand
Mm.
how everything had led up to that point. And the reason that I discovered that I was highly sensitive, I mean, it could have unfolded in a variety of ways, but for me, it was part of when I was recovering from chronic fatigue syndrome. So there were a number of factors that contributed to getting ill with that. And one of them was trying to fit myself into this world that wasn't really geared towards a highly sensitive person,
Mhm.
and pushing beyond that and masking it. And the world can be very overstimulating when you're highly sensitive, and all of that was just too much for the nervous system. And on top of that, there were lots of other things that were going on too, which I would have possibly been able to deal with better had I had the tools back then to manage the sensitivity and be aware that even that I was highly sensitive.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Can you share with us a little more? w- What is a highly sensitive person? Kind of what does it mean, maybe? Not that it needs to be a clinical description, right? But just, yeah, like maybe somebody is like thinking that might be me, or it might explain my own experience. How do you kind of, what resonated most with you, and how do you understand it and explain it to others?
So I think it can be challenging to identify yourself as highly sensitive on your own, because you are experiencing it for yourself. So it's subjective. You don't know how everyone else is experiencing the world. So I thank you for asking me that question, because, that might be able to reflect back to people who are listening, oh, what are the signs of being highly sensitive? So someone who's highly sensitive, they tend to experience the world more intensely, more vividly. It's more easy to become overstimulated because the nervous system is wired slightly differently to somebody who is less sensitive. So if you think about how some people might receive you as being too sensitive, the reason for that might be because they're not perceiving the world in a more intense way, and they don't have necessarily um, like this rich inner world that highly sensitive people are maybe more likely to have. And again, that's not a good or bad thing. It's just a different way of being. And when you do process things more deeply, more intensely, it does have more of an impact, and can actually, if you're not managing what's going on internally, you can actually almost, it feels like you're falling victim to it, because the sights, the sounds, smells, the internal feelings that they create, that can trigger certain thoughts and that kind of thing, which can affect how you feel about the world and yourself. And that's not necessarily a positive thing. I know for myself, I found it really difficult because I knew how I was quote unquote supposed to be. I was told the whole time during my childhood that I was doing it wrong, not in those words, but this is the message that I received because I was processing things in a more sensitive way. And when that happens, you ultimately feel like you have to hide the sensitivity. And that's when you start to get caught in this pattern of, okay, so I'm wrong. And then you internalize that and you start being more hyper vigilant of yourself and you're policing your behaviors and that kind of thing. And then you start to become more critical. And the reason that we do that is because we're trying to keep ourselves safe. We want to be accepted. And when we're very young, we don't want to be neglected. We're wired for survival. And when we're wholly dependent on our caregivers, we're not really able to find our own way in the world, and we need that caregiving support in order to survive. So we are wired to make sure that we try and keep the peace and that kind of thing. Well, maybe not keep the peace, but to deny our own
Mm-hmm.
inner conflict in an attempt
Mm-hmm.
to try and fit in with others, but it does affect whether we feel peace within ourselves because it's creating that inner conflict.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you're describing it, right? Because what I think that's exactly what happens. At least I can relate to when you're sensitive and then, others tell you like it's no big deal or, move on or get on with it, and you kind of feel like you don't fit in, but you don't have words as a kid, right? Of what's
Mm-hmm.
on. You really need, any child needs nurture. And so many of us are deprived of like sufficient nurturing energy, even in childhood. But I think it helps when you describe your experience. I think as highly sensitive people also sometimes look too much on the outside to validate that experience or for somebody else to tell them that's it. But I think it's helpful like that people will recognize, right, kind of step by step through their own experiences and other people's stories. I think most of us come to that knowing at some point of time that yes, that's me.
Yes, I mean, in my experience, there's usually something that happens that makes you more aware. But there may be some people that go through their lives without realizing that it is a recognized thing now, and that they're highly sensitive, and because they don't necessarily want to acknowledge that.
Hmm.
The older generations, for instance, they had a very different model for how to be in the world and that kind of thing. And especially in Britain, it's stiff upper lip and all calm and controlled, and you don't kind of show your feelings. Um, and so yeah, it can be a generational thing as well. So maybe older people would be less aware of that being a thing, and it just being dismissed as something a bit snowflakey. I don't know if that's the word.
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get it. Because the other day I was teaching a class and I said, well, I ended the class saying, well, like, you guys showed up for yourselves. And so that's a form of self-love. Or is that, and
Yeah.
is that a new agey thing? It's, depending on what the person's beliefs and their ages. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. And another beautiful story that you have from your childhood was related to what you thought you wanted to be when you grow up.
Yes. So when I was little, I took on the world as everyone does and aligned myself with that in order to fit in, which is particularly important as a highly sensitive person. And so we all, well, most of us, looked at our parents, our caregivers at that very young age. And I observed my father, who he was a solicitor, which, if you don't know, because I know that the terminology varies across the pond, but a solicitor is a kind of lawyer. And he had his own, or has his own law firm, and he worked very hard. And I remember one Christmas, I got this lovely doctor's briefcase, and it had like a thermometer, a stethoscope, all these different kinds of things, blood pressure monitor. And yeah, so I thought, oh, this is cool. And I tipped it all out. And then I got together lots of paperwork, lots of bits of paper and stuff. And I stuffed the briefcase. And then on the front, there was a little area to put the doctor's name on. And I crossed everything out and I put my name. And then I put solicitor in my childlike spelling on the front of the briefcase. And I'm not quite sure exactly how old I was then. I must have been between 5 or 7, something like that. Uh, but yeah, that shows just how embedded the need for approval, and also the desire to be like your caregiver, because you're looking up to them and they're modeling the world for you and you're learning from them. And that was very much embedded in me from a very young age, and it led me on the path to ultimately going to law school. So as I got older, I did have creative pursuits. I loved to act and draw and all of these kinds of things. And I really wanted at one point to go to drama school, not to replace actual, everyday school as such, just as an extracurricular activity. And my parents, they loved me very much. They wanted the best for me. They wanted me to be successful, and they won me off it because they wanted me to be able to look after myself financially when I was older, and they were probably concerned about me being a kind of starving artist type. And so whenever I felt drawn to any of these more creative things, I always kind of pulled it back, because I felt, whether it was consciously or unconsciously, that they did it because, of course, they just wanted the best for me. But as a highly sensitive little girl, I would also be picking up on the unspoken, not just spoken. So, um, micro expressions, tone of voice, and energy, this kind of thing. So I moved away from that and I went along to school. And in school, I thrived with writing, and I also enjoyed religious studies and philosophy. And so, even though I knew that doing those at university wasn't really going to ultimately lead me to, the final destination of a particular established career, I decided to rebel, which isn't particularly rebellious, but that was kind of like my little mini rebellion of doing what I was really interested in. So I went to university and I studied philosophy, theology, religious studies, and I absolutely loved it. It was such a fascinating topic. And then as I started to finish my degree, I started to panic because I was thinking, what do I do now? And I kind of looked into coaching, because something was coaching that I was actually really passionate about when I was younger. So this is another little story, actually. So when I was about 7 years old, my mum, I remember she was getting a bit tired of mine and my sister's antics. We were being a little bit, boisterous, a little bit mischievous. And so she sent us outside to play, because she just wanted, space to breathe, with 3 kids running around her feet. So we went into the garden, but we started to get hungry, and we were too scared to go back inside in case we got in trouble. So I took my younger sister through this coaching exercise. I didn't really know, it was a coaching exercise back then, but I actually helped her to move through that hunger so that she felt better. And it worked so well that when we were called inside for lunch, she actually wasn't hungry. She didn't want to eat anything.
That is so interesting. Wow.
So yes, I was absolutely fascinated with all of the kind of personal development world and that kind of thing from a young age because I'd read anything that was lying around the house. I'd like pick up books and stuff and just dip in and out of them. And then when I was about 15, I did a Tony Robbins course. And then I returned to that when I was in college, which in the UK, you go to secondary school and then you go to college if you want to. So it's not compulsory in the UK. And then if once you finish college, you want to go to university, you do that afterwards.
Mhm.
So there's exams when you finish secondary school, and then that tells you, it informs the college
Mhm.
whether, you know, what level you're at so that they can then allocate you with places and stuff. And so I went to college, and that was for me, that was really the crucial time because I knew I wanted to go to university. And so I did this Tony Robbins course again in order to get myself some leverage, give myself the motivation to actually get into university doing the course that I really wanted to do. And so, yeah, these things were of such interest to me. And that was when I started to explore it as I was coming towards the end of my degree. And I just had so much self doubt about being able to succeed with it because there wasn't an established route. There wasn't as much acceptance about it. I was worried about how, the people in my lives would react to it. And so I ultimately decided to go down the conventional established route and apply to law school. And it was while I was at law school that I started to become ill with chronic fatigue syndrome.
Wow.
Yes, so it was a very pivotal moment for me but I didn't realize that it was going to be as powerful as that at the time. I just thought, oh my goodness, my world is crumbling because I'm not very well.
Mm.
And this is just, it sounds so trite, but it's actually true for me in a way that becoming ill with chronic fatigue syndrome did ultimately help me to find my own path, the one that was true to me. And in that respect, it was a gift. But it definitely didn't feel like it at the time. And it was so challenging. And there was lots of pain. And basically, I experienced a lot of suffering. And I do appreciate there are a lot of people out there who they become ill with chronic fatigue syndrome and they don't find their way through it. And my heart goes out to them. It's very, it's a very complicated
Mhm.
illness, and I think it's unlikely. It's my belief that it's unlikely that there'll ever be any one cure because they don't understand it enough, and it's so multifaceted, and it's often like a bucket diagnosis. So they rule out lots of other things before they actually say this is what you have. And in that respect, it it's not like you can just pinpoint that's where it is. So this is what we do. There's like lots of different factors that go into it that need addressing in a holistic way, and not everything is going to work for everyone. And it's just so complicated, and that's why I don't really think that there will be any one cure. Maybe there's different types that we're not yet aware of. I know that some research came out recently about um, inflammation in the brain, which has finally been established by science. And I didn't actually start researching it once I saw that article headline, but I just thought that's interesting. They're finally making some strides in finding out what's causing it, but it's still a very complicated picture.
Yeah. So did you start feeling the fatigue when you went to law school?
Yes, so it was within the first few months that I started to feel fatigue and get a lot of other symptoms, which, I'm not here to focus on symptoms and stuff, uh, because, that's not what this conversation is about. But I did start to collect symptoms as I progressed in law school, and there were no answers from the doctors. There was a lot going on in my personal life as well. So uh, there was stress mounting. I was
Mhm.
trying to pay my way through law school. So I had a job initially as well, and then I ended up leaving that job because there was too much stress, and that, of course, then created financial difficulties that were more stressful for me. And I just started to become really, really run down. So I was catching virus after virus after virus and never bouncing back each time. I was just less of who I was before in terms of the energy, and I had lots of different strange symptoms that nobody could seem to explain.
Mhm.
And it was partly when I was on my way to a placement at a human rights and disability law firm. I was just walking there one day and I actually had a fall and broke my coccyx.
Oh, tough.
And for me, that was just the moment where everything just started to crumble for me, because it's almost like I fell down and then I didn't get back up, metaphorically.
Mhm.
Everything just became so much harder then. I just felt like I was pushing constantly. Every day was a battle. Like, normally
Mhm.
I would be very much one of those people that you see power walking down the street everywhere you go, that kind of thing. And now it was just, I'd have to actually take rest stops on my walk into law school, which was probably about a 30-minute walk away, but I would actually do it much more quickly. And yeah, suddenly it just became like this mammoth task to get there, and I'd have to like stop for a sit down and coffee and whatever. And it just got to the point where I couldn't really concentrate on my work because it was taking so much out of me. I would get what's known as post-exertional malaise or payback. So I would exert myself and then I'd get a delayed payback, and it would be about 2 days for physical activity. So actually physically walking into the law school. And it would be about 1.5 days for mental activity. So actually
Mhm.
studying
Mhm.
uh, the coursework. And the reason that I became aware of this was because I started doing this thing called pacing and grading, which is where you basically break down your activities and what you do, and you can see patterns of
Mhm.
where your energy dips
Mhm.
and where other symptoms come up. And so I learned from doing that 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 was my pattern.
Mhm.
And I went to the doctors for like what felt like the millionth time.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I sat down and I talked through everything that I was going through. We'd had so many tests that had come back fine or borderline, and borderline but not of a concern kind of thing. And I was trying to explain something just wasn't right. I knew something wasn't right, but they were very dismissive of me. And I came away feeling like they thought I was just a lazy student that, couldn't be bothered to exercise
Mhm.
and just, couldn't be bothered to do what's needed to be done in order to succeed, basically. And she kind of had a response to everything that I said and just dismissed it down. And so he cut it down and dismissed it. And so I came out of that doctor's surgery in floods of tears. I remember I was just sat in the car park, just like crumpled up in a heap. I hadn't even driven there, but I just, the problem was it was only a short walk there, and I had optimistically walked to the doctor's surgery, but I just didn't have the energy to walk back, and I just felt so defeated. And I thought, why isn't this doctor listening to me?
Hmm.
because there's all these signs here. And it's only looking back now that I realize that's probably how my body felt, because my body was sending me these signals, trying to get my attention, and I just wasn't listening. And that was just being mirrored back to me, but I had no idea at the time. And I realized at that point that I was basically on my own with it, that if I was going to find a way out of it, it was up to me. And even though I ultimately was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, by that point, I had already looked for people who had recovered, because there was just this inner nudge, there's quite a voice saying, you can get through this, you can recover, you can feel better. So I had a look online to find people who recovered, and I did in fact find these two women who had both had it pretty badly. They'd had it worse than I had, and they'd recovered from it. And so I signed up to their coaching program, and it was with their help that I actually discovered that I was a highly sensitive person,
Mm.
and all of the other things that contributed to me being unwell. And that's not to say that anyone who gets chronic fatigue syndrome, that it's their fault at all whatsoever. It's just there's lots of different things that contribute to it.
Mhm.
And it was looking at this holistic picture of what was causing it for me
Mhm.
that allowed me to start honing in on the different areas. And a lot of it was physical, so having nutritional needs met, having a way forward for the symptoms that I was experiencing, such as I was getting a lot of fungal infections, for instance, and it was that I learned about how diet and stress can impact those kinds of things, and learning how to move through that. And then, of course, as I've already mentioned, there was the whole aspect of whether you're actually living in a way that's being true to yourself. And of course, if you're not, then that's causing more stress for you, which just sets off the nervous system.
This is what I was going to ask you. Like, how much do you think the contributing factor was that you were trying to do and force something that wasn't meant for you, that wasn't your path?
Yeah, I absolutely agree that that contributed so much. And for other people, they might not feel that that's the case for them with their experience of CFS-ME. And I completely understand that. But yes, for me personally, it was a huge factor, absolutely huge. And it was very difficult for me to let go of the idea of being this lawyer, because I really wanted to have the established career, to be perceived as successful in the way that the world expects you to be successful. And I wanted to please my parents
Mhm.
and do well and be accepted and fit in with everybody else. And it wasn't until I started to really look at how all of these factors were contributing that I realized I can't go back to law school. And so I deferred my studies. And when they asked, okay, are you ready to come back now because it's coming up to the end of this deferment period? And I just said, no, thank you. And at that point, I just thought, what on earth am I going to do next? Like, I
Yeah.
knew that there was something there because I've been looking at all of the different things that I've been interested in when I was younger, and all of the things that I was good at, and kind of like matching them up to see the overlaps there. And that's ultimately what led me onto the path that I had always wanted to go on. I just hadn't fully acknowledged it because I was very scared, and that was coaching. And it was as I started to pursue that, like the more I pursued that, the better I became in terms of my health.
That's beautiful. So, how did you, okay, so you're deferring the studies. How did you connect the dots to coaching, it will be coaching? I know you had that moment with your sister, but how, from kind of this very traditional path of becoming a lawyer to coaching, how did you transition to that?
So, firstly, it was because I was learning how to coach myself as I grew up, so I've been through lots of different things. Some of them I haven't mentioned here, and one of those things was the chronic fatigue syndrome. Another was the uh, doing well in my exams, so I could then go to my chosen university to do my chosen course. And so I had always been into coaching in various guises, always believing in the human potential. I remember when I was in my mid-teens, I was probably earlier than that actually. There was something that I'd put on my ceiling that I'd just written out in this beautifully creative handwriting that I'd stylized at the time in art class, and it said, "The mind holds no limits, has no bounds. Surpass yourself, discover your true potential, shine." I haven't thought about that in years, but yeah, that's something that I created to remind myself every day. I just had it on my ceiling to inspire me, and just to make that make sense. I had like my bed under one of those sloping roofs, so I could actually see it really, really clearly when I lay down in bed at night and when I woke up in the morning.
Um,
So yes, and the other part was that I just reflected back on what it was that really inspired me and really felt good to me. And there's nothing out there to say that just because you're passionate about something, you have to go into it as a career.
yeah.
And lots of people do both. You know, they can like have a career that's not really uh, something that they're necessarily passionate about, but they still are passionate about something, and they find fulfillment in that passion, and they also find they also find purpose in their career, even if it's not uh, what they would consider to be their passion. You know, there's lots of different ways to go about this, but for some people, and I think I'm one of those people, it really just feel like in order to thrive, it has to be in alignment with your passion, because it just feels like that's who you are. That if you're not in alignment with it in
Mhm.
every aspect, then it's going to have a ripple effect, and that's not usually a beneficial one.
Yeah, yeah. And so like the coaching, it just like came to you. I know you had listened to Tony Robbins, but you hadn't really done coaching. It just like, did you see it? I guess when you enrolled in those programs, did you like think, okay, maybe I can do that? Or
Yes, so as I said before, when I was younger, there were lots of personal development books around the house that I would just pick up and dip in and out of, and I absolutely loved the tone of them and how
yeah.
it made me see the world in a different way and made me realize the power that I actually had as a human being.
Mhm.
And I would sometimes be doing like these playful little games with my friends and stuff, just trying to demonstrate the power of the human mind. And uh, that kind of thing, it resonated with me so much, like how much potential there is just between your ears, you know, just what's going on in here, and
Mhm.
how we can modify it to make things turn out in a more productive way rather than kind of sabotaging ourselves,
Mhm.
which wasn't a straight line. You know, I had suffered from anxiety, I'd suffered from depression, and this was, you know, in between the times of the personal development books and the personal development courses, the coaching.
Mhm.
But I always went back to it because I just knew, I just had this inner knowing whenever realized I need to reconnect with myself,
Mhm.
that that was what was calling me and what was ultimately driving me. It was the common thread amongst it all.
Mm. Beautiful. And then you started coaching?
Yes, so I started coaching probably in about 2014. I did my first coach training, and then so originally I did a pure coach training. So that was I don't know how familiar you are with the different training models, but there's one called the Grow model, which is You're basically asking questions that help people to come to their own conclusions. It's the belief that the answers are inside you,
Hmm.
and it helps you to choose your goals and how to work out a way forward, looking at the reality of the situation and all the different options that you have in front of you. And so I trained in that, and then I trained with people who'd helped me to recover from CFS in their wellbeing coaching program, which was built on the grow model that I just explained. But then, in addition to that, they believed that sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. So
Hmm.
the original pure coaching model is saying you have all the answers inside of you, but then this one was saying, but actually, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know.
Hmm.
So the well-being aspects allowed me to incorporate things that would help people to move forward that they wouldn't necessarily have been able to pull out themselves because they weren't aware of it. And those things were in alignment with a holistic approach to
Hmm.
wellness.
Hmm.
And I wanted to be more out there with helping people with chronic fatigue syndrome, or at least who are recovering from chronic fatigue.
I was
But I was,
thinking, were you thinking because of your own journey that that's what you
mhm.
wanted to help people with?
Yeah, so I started with life purpose coaching. So because life purpose was a huge part of my journey
Yeah.
um, in recovery, that was the angle that I started to go in with. So
Which
I
makes
was,
sense because like you experienced what it does when you're going off of an aligned path. Now
yeah,
we kind of started the conversation about it.
yeah, yeah. So I set out to help people realign themselves with their path by exploring their life purpose. And I then did another coach training that I came across. And at that time, I still had this kind of like tug of war almost between my head and my heart. And while I didn't feel like the pure coaching model was sufficient, it was very much head based. And, you know, being somebody who uh, used that particular area a lot more than the heart area. Sorry, I'm just laughing at myself here because it's making me sound like I'm uh, basically saying that I'm using my brain, but I don't mean it like that. I mean like it's like a logical approach, analyzing things and being rational, whereas the heart is a different uh, kind of energy. So I had this tug of war between the head and the heart, and the legal stuff was all logical, rational. And so I still had this tendency to go towards that because it was my default mode for so long. And so the pure coaching model, it met that logical need, but I still had this yearning in my heart. And in spite of that, when I saw this coaching program offered, I thought, oh, tick, 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 it hits all of the logical buttons for me. So I signed up for it for this weekend event. And when I got there, it was incredible because they didn't just do the logical stuff. They were also very heart-based and quite spiritual. And a light bulb just went off. So I signed up for their master coach training program and became qualified as a master coach with them. And it was after that that then I started coaching highly sensitive women specifically. And while I was doing that, I started my own journey towards weight release because I'd had this checkered history with food and my body, very dysfunctional, unhealthy relationship with my body and food. And I'd had body dysmorphia and I'd had binge eating disorder. And these elements were in the process of being healed during that whole time period. So from university to having chronic fatigue syndrome to then recovering, that was a difficult period for me because it triggered a lot of the binge eating behaviors because I felt this void inside me and that I was trying to fill with food. Basically, it was like trying to push down the feelings, and so that gave me the opportunity to start looking at that. And so I just got to this point in my life where I was like, you know what? I actually am now in a place where I'm accepting of my appearance. I'm accepting of who I am, but having got to this point in my recovery with CFS, I now see that I can improve my health even more. You know, I had issues with like my knees and that kind of thing because of the weight that I was carrying and other different factors. And so I decided, you know what? This time it's going to be different. I'm actually going to release this weight. And at the time, I wasn't using that language, but I was saying, I'm going to lose this weight for me, not for anyone else, not for all the other expectations in the world,
Mhm.
but I'm actually going to do it as an act of self care, as you were talking about earlier, because I deserve to be as healthy
Mhm.
as I desire to be. And it was in that time period that I suddenly found it much, much easier to lose the weight because I was connecting with myself and I wasn't doing it in a way that was pushing because I'd done all of the pushing and striving and that didn't work for me. It got me to the point where I had chronic fatigue syndrome. And
Mhm.
so I decided to apply the more gentle, curious, compassionate way of being to losing weight
Mhm.
because I was done with the diets and the restriction, the deprivation, punishment, the boot camps, all of that kind of stuff. It was just so heavy and it wasn't getting me the results that I desired.
Mhm.
So I found my own way with that. And it was while I was doing that that people were starting to ask me, how are you doing it?
Mhm.
And so it really evolved from there, how I suddenly became a mentor almost for highly sensitive people who were struggling with their weight. And then I decided to formalize it by doing a qualification. So I'm now qualified as a holistic weight loss expert, in addition to having that experience myself of what it is to come home to yourself and stop actually listening to everything else that's outside of you and
Exactly.
just tune back into yourself. What is it that resonates with me? And there are certain ways that I help women do that that actually can be really transformative, even though some of it is quite simple, but it's about tuning out the external noise and also tuning out the internal noise that's been created as a result of the external noise and coming back to who you are and listening to your own inner knowing. What is that little voice,
Mhm.
that quiet voice telling you, and checking in with that and filtering the world through that rather than just constantly deferring to the authority that you've given to everybody else's advice and the diet industry.
Yeah, and it extends beyond the diet industry. It extends
Mm-hmm.
like there's just we are living in this social media, everybody's talking loud, right? There's a lot of noise, everybody has their beliefs, their opinions, and they're proclaiming them as absolute truth. And like you said, when you're highly sensitive, it's
Mm-hmm.
for anybody that energy reverberates, but especially for highly sensitive, it's you're taking it in, but then it's staying with you. And kind of what you were talking about, like the lights, I think that's where also sometimes um, when you're sensitive, it's harder for you to go into the office, and for somebody who is not
Yes.
sensitive, right, no big deal. But I remember when I go into the office, and if the office is just gray and you look around and you just feel already that kind of smothering energy,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't even take it, like let alone take it for 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
or I feel like computer work, like I can do an hour or two, but like it starts to drain me, like literally drain me. So I think
Yeah.
that highly, and for other people, it doesn't, they're not as sensitive and it doesn't drain them. And they're like, you just, it's just like, it becomes very enlightening when you become aware of it and start to accept it. And then you have to like, you can fine tune and understand
Yeah.
what's going on, right? And
Yeah.
be more gentle. And it is hard to listen to yourself. This coming home to yourself is, it's a journey.
It sure is. Yes.
Yeah. How did you start feeling better? And then, as we wrap up, I'd love for you to share um, where people can find you, connect with you, and follow you.
I was able to go on a trip to LA on my own in, I think it was 2014. Yeah, I think it was September 2014 or 2015. And started to become ill in 2008. And then it got to the point where I just was minimally functioning in 2009. So I think I was about 80% better when I went to LA, which will have been 5 years or so after I first got ill. And then it did take some time to feel like, yes, that's behind me now, probably another year or two,
Hmm.
possibly. But it's definitely a process and it's different for everyone. And as I said before, some people they don't actually ever really feel like they've put it fully behind them, and they really have my sympathy there because it is such an isolating, debilitating place to be, and only had it in a mild to medium way. I was housebound for a period, um, and I know that a lot of people, if they have it severely, they're bedbound. So it's a very complex illness. And I count myself very fortunate to be living the life that I'm living today.
Mm, yeah, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Eloise. And how can people find you and connect with you?
So you can connect with me on Instagram. I'm at Ellouise Heather, ELLOUISE. I love Instagram. I love being over there. I love connecting with people, including you. And if you would like, you can also take a look at my peaceful weight release movement. Oh, if you want to come along for the ride and sign up for my newsletter, then I offer a free gift to you, which is Calm Those Cravings, and that's available. You can either get it from my Instagram bio or elouiseheather.coach/calm cravings.
Yeah, you can send me the link, like two links, and I will,
Mm-hmm.
anybody can click on the show notes and access it easily. So you don't have to write it down.
Okay.
Is there anything that you would want to leave us with? Anything I didn't ask that you would like to share?
I think if I was struggling with um, living on purpose right now, what I'd really want to hear from somebody would be that you deserve to feel fulfilled. You are worth it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eloise.
Thank you so much.